You are listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. Thank you for downloading and subscribing. Coming to you virtually live from high atop the historic Raleigh building in beautiful downtown Raleigh. The NCF&B takes the listener behind the scenes to tell the stories of the people that contribute to the creation of the food and beverage community of North Carolina. And now, the misfits in the dish pit, the faces of the front. They are Max Trujillo and Matthew Weiss.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. I am your co-host, Max Trujillo.
And I am your co-host, Matthew Weiss. And today on the show, we have the gents from your favorite beer review, the 90-second beer review. And we have co-founders, Ryan Cummings and Howard Sider. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
All right, you got 90 seconds between the two of you. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Go.
That's going to be tough, but I guess the easy thing is, we are Ryan and Howard. We're 90-second beer review. Essentially, the idea is we're giving people a little bit of insight into what they might like about certain beers that we try. We're not trying to persuade people one way or the other. I think we're more trying to guide them towards what they actually like.
Go, Howard.
Yeah.
Finish this. Take us home.
No, it's simple. It's honestly as simple as that. We started this as a passion project. We love beer. There's a lot of different avenues out there to get beer reviews. We thought that there was really a place for something kind of between the simple numerical ratings that you get on something like Untapped and the 4-paragraph jargon-laden descriptions that you get elsewhere. We really wanted something that was easy for craft beer fans to access, that, when you look at one of our reviews, it should take you no more than 90 seconds to get through the pictures and the description, and you at least have an idea of what to expect when you buy that beer, when you open that can, to help you make decisions, whether it's to buy that specific beer or a beer of a similar style or a beer from that brewery. Really just to help craft beer drinkers figure out what they want to spend their money on. There's a ton of options in the market. And so, that can be really overwhelming to people.
All right, that was about 90 seconds. That's pretty awesome. You guys are right in. From our perspective, from just personal lovers of beer and just being local people here in the Triangle, I specifically, I came across your site and thought, wow, this is really cool. I assumed it was Triangle based. I think there was some connection to Durham in there. Obviously, we'll get into that in a second. But I just noticed that the layout on your Instagram page was very well organized. It's something that listeners will know that my wife does a lot of social media for a living, so that's something we're like always analyzing and looking at. And your site is clean, neat. It's consistent too. Like your format of how you review things is kind of like a modular. I guess you just kind of put the next thing in, and then it's in the same environment. So it's really easy to understand once you understand how you guys do what you do. So that's great, because there are new beers coming out every second of the day, and it's almost impossible to keep up with. For one, if you are listening, and you can go to 90-second beer review on Instagram at 90-second beer review. 90 is the numerical part of it, 90 second. But it's great. I mean, you have a great following. I mentioned North Carolina. Yeah, it does say NY and NC based. So maybe Ryan or I guess Howard, because you are the resident of North Carolina. Why don't you speak to us about why? Why are you here?
Yeah, so I'm Brooklyn born and raised. Spent most of my life in New York. I have always had family in the Chapel Hill area, so I've been coming back and forth my whole life. But my wife moved down here for grad school a number of years ago. Liked the area, wanted to stay. We were both kind of looking for that next place to be outside of New York. And I've just always really enjoyed this area. I think there's a great energy down here. It's got that, I think, perfect balance of enough going on. It's a big enough city, but without being in a major metro area. And I've always been a craft beer fan, but honestly, coming down here, the number of breweries, the quality of breweries, and the access that you have kind of blew me away. Honestly, the first couple of months I was here, I was a little overwhelmed by the number of options that were out there. But, when you're not dealing with New York traffic and public transportation and things like that, the ability to get out to these breweries, see the tap rooms, meet the people behind the bar, really just kind of changed my entire perspective on craft beer.
So, Ryan, you stayed back in New York. Whereabouts are you?
Yeah, so I'm in Long Island. So I've kind of born and raised in Long Island outside of a brief stint in upstate New York. Been here my whole life. So kind of know the area well and really seen it come up from, probably 12 years ago or so. You had a handful of breweries to now. I think I was listening to something the other day from the New York Brewers Guild, and they said I think Long Island is probably the biggest area by population of breweries in the state.
Yeah.
Nice.
And so from an outsider listening, just to introduce us further into your guys' background, why should I listen to you talk to me about beer? What qualifies you guys?
That's a good question. Probably nothing. No, I think that's kind of what actually, we were trying to go for is, we're kind of the everyman. I think by people who take pride in what we do, we want to make sure that we're doing good reviews, we're giving good content. We make sure that we pay attention to, the Cicerone program and try to model what we do off kind of what they do. But at the same time, the appeal very much is that we're trying to talk to your average person and, be a common voice, I guess, and not go too in depth. And that's kind of the concept between, by keeping things short is that, it's the whole premise was revolved around like as if you were talking to a friend, what do you think of this beer? And they would give you a little bit of feedback. That's what we're trying to do. And, I think with us, with mediums like Untapped, for example, you don't exactly know what the person on the other end is rating with. I think we provide a certain consistency that you kind of know what we're thinking, how we explain things, and, you can, I guess, have a steady source at all times.
Yeah, and I think that the other important part in there is like, we like to nerd out on beer all the time. We do a lot of reading and watching of, movies, listening to brewers' interviews, trying to educate ourselves as much as we possibly can and stay up to date on what's going on in the industry. But when it comes down to our reviews, to Ryan's point, we really try to keep things fairly simple. We don't want to bring in too much brewing jargon and things like that the average craft beer drinker isn't going to understand. And then the other piece of it really is that, we understand that what we like and what our tastes aren't going to be everybody else's. And so if we don't like something, if we do like something, we try to be pretty honest and specific about what it is we do or don't like, and then try to make some recommendations. Look, I didn't like this because it was super high in acidity and it had a lot of passion fruit, and I'm just not a big fan of passion fruit, or whatever the case may be. But there might be somebody out there that wants that beer for that exact reason. And so I think it's just trying to be honest and give people that perspective, because look, at the end of the day, we aren't the end all be all of who should be drinking what beer. We're just two people that love beer, that like to educate ourselves and like to try a lot of things. And we want to try to help people find what they want.
Yeah.
And inside of that, do the two of you have similar flavor profiles and taste palettes? How are your palettes similar or different?
I'd say we're fairly similar. I think there's definitely been an evolution, which I think is the thing that's been interesting as we've been trying beers. I think in the beginning, I was more the sours and stouts guy, and Howard tended to lean more towards IPAs. And, I think over time, Howard's gotten more of an appreciation for sours. I think I've kind of gotten more of an appreciation towards the hoppier IPAs. I think the New England and stuff I always enjoyed. But, it's kind of interesting how you've seen your taste change as you've kind of become more accustomed to things.
I read the subtext in what you just said, Ryan, and you were basically like, I have a very astute palate, and Howard eventually came up to my par, and I dumbed it down a little bit so that I can like what.
I definitely wouldn't say that. I would say that I think it's different beers apply to different people, and over time, like I said, the hoppier stuff has never been, and I would say it still probably isn't. But I've definitely gained an appreciation for it. I actually found myself maybe about a week ago sitting there going, man, I just want like a hoppy West Coast IPA today. And I would have never said that, 2 years ago. Yeah. So I think, that's the element that your taste changes over time. That's a natural thing for anybody. So yeah, that was.
Wait, in that scenario, does that mean that the hoppy West Coast IPA is actually like an elevated palate, or it's more of like a commercially widely accepted style of beer?
I don't think you could frame it really either way, honestly. Like it's I think it all depends on where you come from, right? Because your palate, the way that you experience flavors, a lot of that's tied to what you've had to eat and drink during your lifetime. It's, your brain is constantly building this library of flavors. And so if that's what you were more exposed to earlier in your life, that's that's where you start, and then you kind of work your way around. And I think that was the interesting thing for us. We didn't come into this trying to do anything big or crazy. We just really liked beer. We wanted to do this as a fun kind of side project. And I think at the time that we started, we were really just kind of getting into it. We were trying to teach ourselves about how to use social media, trying to teach ourselves about beer. And the more beers we tried, the more we learned about other styles and branched out, the more our palates adjusted. And I think, honestly, one of the funnier kind of things for me was when I came into this, I was not a coffee drinker. And I started drinking stouts, porters, things like that. I actually developed a taste for coffee from coffee beers and went backwards into it. And then the more interesting thing to me right now is over the last couple of years, my wife has tried a lot of beers with me. She really wasn't a big beer drinker at the beginning of this either. And she's kind of having the same palate evolution over time where different styles, she's gaining more of an appreciation for them. And it's really kind of cool to see people kind of move down that path as they really get into craft beer.
Howard always gets like really weird looks at Starbucks though when he orders his coffee and then like he pulls out a Guinness and just starts pouring it in there instead of cream and sugar.
Yeah, it's not common on the menu there.
So I still hate coffee. So
okay, so it doesn't work for everybody. But this is I was trying to make an analogy because I approach everything from like a wine centric point of view, and in the wine business. And sorry to I'm gonna like burst the bubble of a lot of people going into wine, but wine professionals look at those people who like drink California Cabernet as kind of like beginners, if in the nicest way possible, and that leads them into other thing. That's where you start because it's big, it's bold, it's fruity, you think it's powerful, and then eventually your palate kind of evolves, and then you want something a little bit more elegant and subtle, and you go into drinking Brunello and then Pinot Noir and blah blah blah. And so my analogy was that like juicy New England IPAs or super hoppy West Coast IPAs are like the equivalent of California Cabernets to like the beginning wine beer drinker, because they're like in your face and bold flavors and you think that's all you want. So I'm wondering if that still holds true. Like essentially, do you shit on people that drink I think juicy hoppy IPAs?
The beer that's kind of that entryway is American Light Lager. It's the macro lagers. Yeah. It's the easy drinking stuff that doesn't have a whole lot of flavor to it. What I actually think is from that point on where you go, it almost depends on when you start drinking beer, right? Because the craft beer industry is constantly evolving. There are different styles that are kind of in vogue at different times. And so like when I got into craft beer, it was that period in time where the big craze was how big, how bitter, how intense could you make this beer? And I mean, these IPAs were tongue-scrapingly bitter. They were honestly sometimes hard to drink, but that was what was popular. That's what most breweries were producing. And so that's where I started, and I kind of came from the super hoppy, bitter end of the spectrum and worked my way around. These days, I would imagine that a lot of people are probably easing into craft beer with a juicy New England IPA or a fruited, a light fruited sour, a Gosa, a Berliner Weiss. I think a lot of it really has to do with that because the beer industry is constantly changing.
Yeah, that's probably why we have the variants, because I actually came the opposite route where I went more, obviously I think everybody kind of starts off with your Keystone Lights in my case, or a Bud Light or something like that. But I evolved into more brown ales and amber lagers and stuff like that. And maybe by not going that, pine tree in a can route, I, kind of came across from the opposite side. So that's why you might see a variance in where we start and where we finish in our beer evolution.
Well, just let's frame that for a second, because I really like the way that you guys have your review methodology. You have a 5-point scale, and it's pretty cool. And I'm just wondering, though, because you were saying before that you recognize that you have different palates than the maybe whoever, whether they have an evolved palate or they have just a beginner palate. But your scale does have something to do with, will you purchase that beer again? Is this a must-have in your fridge? Mm-hmm. Is that kind of setting the precedent that is like, these are beers that you guys love versus letting people know that you might not love this, but this is what we feel about it?
Well, that's the scale. That's the general. So I guess the first thing I'd put out there, and I think it's something that Ryan and I talked about a lot as we were developing the platform, is what we really focus on is the recommendation. The number is purely driven by the recommendation. A lot of people find it easy to use the number to kind of compare. But we really focus on the recommendation. I think one thing that you'll notice as you kind of go through our content is we'll have kind of that basic recommendation that corresponds with the scale, but a lot of times there'll be some additional commentary after that. Like, I may love a certain beer for a certain reason, so I give it, I rate it as I would definitely purchase and drink again, and I put the corresponding number in there. But I might add another sentence or two that maybe quantifies why. Because that's the part that honestly, and I hope that a lot of our followers find that useful, is that really quantifies why I think it's the way it is and why I'm recommending and rating it the way I am. But that doesn't necessarily apply to you. And so you have to, use the pictures, use the description, use that recommendation to make your own decision about what you want to spend your money on and what you want to drink.
So only to challenge you, and this is where like politics gets in when it comes to like Matt and I, we are not reviewers. We do not give really like, I think we said it early in the beginning of the show when we started doing a show about food and beverage. We were like, no, we're telling the narrative about what the food and beverage industry is about in North Carolina. That's what it is. And so by virtue of you being on our show, we feel like your story is relevant to the topic of the food and beverage industry of North Carolina. That doesn't mean we're saying it's the best or it's better than someone else or that it sucks. Like that, it means nothing. It's just, this is a story that needs to be told in this area. But many times over, we like the people or we like the product or the food or whatever it is of which we have on the show. And so we're curious about like knowing more. So we have them on the show. In your sense, you guys are, for one, you're faceless in a sense. Like you're an Instagram. People know who Matt and I are in the local area because we're like, we do things and like we either run restaurants or Matt, he's going into every place. So like if Matt was talking shit all the time about Durham restaurants and the places he hated, well, it probably wouldn't bode well for like him selling wine to said restaurant or just for getting people to come on our show. They're like, I'm not going on that show. Those guys are fucking dicks. You could be total assholes on your review. So I'm just challenging you a little bit. Most of the beers I see on your show, on your site are, I would drink again. I would do again. I would get it again. The worst I genuinely see is I might drink that again, which feels more like this beer is not very good. So I just want to know, where do you fall on the politics of that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we're very selective, right? We want to, let's be honest, we have to put this stuff in our mouth, right? We don't want to pick something that we're not going to like. We know kind of the breweries and, we're not going out to try to find bad beers. We're trying to go out to find good beers and kind of relay those to people. So, I would think that's probably part of the reason why you see that it tends to be on the higher end of the scale is just for that reason, because we're trying to find good beers. We're not trying to go out of our way and say, well, what's the worst thing I could possibly drink? Because who wants to do that? So,
yeah, and it also comes from our perspective here again. Like we're not trying to put ourselves in a position where we're the end all be all verdict on what is a good or a bad beer, but we're coming up from it from the perspective that we love craft beer. We love what craft breweries do. I think both of us have kind of seen over time. I mean, the effect that craft breweries have on a community is phenomenal. I mean, the amount of time that these breweries focus on environmental and community related aspects, we want to be there to support them. We're doing it in our own way. We did see where we thought there was a place for a different type of beer review and a different kind of take on what people are drinking. But again, we're not there to try to be the New York Times food critic that goes to a restaurant and just kind of craps all over it. Yeah. That's not what we're about. That's not what we're interested in doing. I don't really find that to be very fun.
It is refreshing, though, to hear somebody take a stand on something and be like, this was not good. I do not like it. I once sold a wine, and I just out of respect of not talking shit about the particular winery, I sold a wine that was not good. And it was a weird winery. It was large, and they had a red wine maker and a white wine maker. That's how big they were, and it was just kind of very disassociated and kind of bizarre. The red wine, this Merlot they had released, and it was like an 03 Merlot. It was their entry-level one. James Lauby of The Spectator, who is, very well respected in the industry, gave it a 69. Matt, have you ever seen a sub 70 rating on The Spectator?
That's basically burying it.
And he put 3 words as his review: impossible to drink.
Oh.
Ouch.
And I, because I'm an asshole, printed out like 85 of those for our general sales meeting, and I handed it out to all of our staff. And I'm like, hey guys, when you go and sell this next bottle, here you go. Take this in to your buyers.
Make it a challenge. See if you can drink it.
Like, you're such an asshole. I'm like, hey man, it's at least very one thing. Like, it's really shitty, so you can almost sell it on that.
Yeah, I would almost
like, ironically,
that might be an issue, like an interesting challenge, right? So it's kind of like how people go out and try to eat like spicy peppers or something like that. Maybe you're like, hey, you finish this bottle. We put it. You know,
it's not impossible to drink.
I could drink it. No, you guys are trying to tell the story of great folks, and we like to support those people because somebody that supports us is the Folks Foundation.
That's right. The Folks Foundation, which is a 501c3. You know, we talk about what that is. It's a nonprofit organization that's put together solely for the fact of trying to build independent businesses that are on the creative side. It doesn't have to be food and beverage. It's just crafters in North Carolina. And so Folks Foundation, they are the champions of all things craft in North Carolina, and they do a great job by supporting local businesses. They can be artisans, they could be cheesemakers, they could be podcasters or musicians, but whatever makes sense. They award grants to particular artisans every month. And so do them a favor by checking out their Folks Journal. They do a quarterly journal about all the content that's happening in the artisan world of North Carolina, as well as consider a small donation to help support that same engine that fuels the donation process for these artisans. So go to folksfoundation.org, learn more information about it, and let them know that the gents over at the NCF&B said it.
And while we're on that, let's just say that probably a lot of these beers that you guys are reviewing and endorsing, if I might say, are available at the Triangle Wine Company. And the Triangle Wine Company is great friends here in North Carolina. They have 4 locations, one in Holly Springs, they're in Cary, they're all the way out in Southern Pines, and they're in Morrisville, and soon to be in North Raleigh. Any day now, Chris tells me. So they have an amazing beer selection. They have some really cool beer releases. Plus, during this time, they'll deliver, or you can have a curbside delivery. Don't forget, when you're checking out, use the NCFB promo code. You'll receive a discount. And go to trianglewineco.com for all your beer, wine, vermouth needs.
Now we're back. All right, this isn't a foreplay, gents. We've been talking about what you guys do, what you're doing, but we are here for a purpose. We've got something to discuss, and you came to us to ask some participation, and we were more than happy, excited to participate. But I'll let you frame it out for what it is. But let's talk about Pints of Love.
Yeah, so Pints of Love is our virtual Valentine's craft beer experience. It's a virtual craft beer festival. Ryan and I are extremely excited to put this on. The whole idea behind this, Lemonade Social, is the virtual event platform we're using. And really, at the end of the day, you know, Ryan and I are lucky enough to have, you know, day jobs that allow us to do this for fun. And so when we put this together and we put our time and effort into an event, you know, we don't want this to be something where craft beer fans aren't getting really a good event. You know, they're not getting quality content. And we really wanted this to be an event that can serve a lot of good purposes. And so we spent a lot of time having conversations with different parties to figure out what type of event would really work best for everyone. And so we have 2 co-organizers for this event. Chris Creech, a former guest of the podcast, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
And
that's right.
the Glass Jug Beer Lab in Durham, and Mark Dublé of Hopscotch Bottle Shop in Deer Park, New York. They've been fantastic. They are handling all of our physical beer pack sales for the event. You know, it's really helpful working with them. They both operate in 2 different markets. Chris also has, the brewery at Glass Jug in addition to the bottle shop, so he brought a lot of great experience in terms of just what happens throughout the year and what really is useful to both craft breweries and craft beer fans. And, you know, frankly, early in the year tends to be a relatively dead time for the craft beer industry. Past the holidays, you're past all of the Oktoberfest festivals, everything like that. A lot of people are doing dry January and all that kind of stuff. And so it's a tough time of year, and it's coming at the beginning of 2021 after what has been a really tough year for everybody in the food and beverage industry and hospitality, you name it. And so we found that time of year could be a time to do something that was really useful to get attention back on some of these great craft breweries. And, you know, with everything that's going on with COVID, unfortunately, I think it's going to be a pretty long and isolated winter for a lot of people. And Valentine's Day weekend is a tough enough one for people as it is. When we're putting this all together, why not come up with an event where we give people a socially distanced, safe option where they can have entertainment all weekend that weekend? And so we started putting things together, and we've been incredibly lucky to get a wonderful response from people like you guys and from all these craft breweries that we've gotten involved with the event. And we think we're going to have a really fantastic 2 days of content with the breweries that we have involved. We have no doubt that the beers that end up in the VIP packs are going to be fantastic. And we're just excited to get this thing going.
So if I'm a customer and I'm like, I love beer, I follow the 90-second beer review guys, I trust their judgment and all that, why would I want to jump in this? Like, what am I going to get out of the experience of this 2-day festival?
Yeah, so I mean, aside from great beer in the beer packs, right, I think we also want to look at what's in the festival. And we've really tried to put together a festival that appeals to everybody. So, I think just kind of going through some of the events that we have beer and yoga and beer and bar, a local Long Island company that we're working with. I think we have podcasts, obviously like yourselves, as well as some, from around the country, music that will be on tap. So it's something that will really appeal to everybody. So obviously the appeal is beer, right? And we're talking about having great brewers on, talking about great beer. A little bit of something for everybody is really what it's coming into. And, just getting involved in the festival. If nothing else, tune in, you get a ton of great content coming out.
Yeah, and I think and the other part is from a cost benefit and kind of access standpoint, it really couldn't be any easier. The tickets are $15. That gets you access to all of the content for the weekend. Everything is on the Lemonade social app. There'll be a schedule set out for the whole weekend with different sessions, entertainment. But the great part about doing this virtually is every one of these sessions is also going to be recorded and available on demand for the rest of the weekend and for a number of days afterwards. So if you have interest in the event, if you want to get access to this content, it also doesn't require that you sit at your computer for 2 days straight and watch all of this. You have the flexibility to access the content as you want over the weekend. And for us, that just seemed like a no-brainer. It's a good way to get this into people's homes. And then the packs themselves, again, it's a way to bring some business and some attention to local businesses. So we've got 12 breweries in each state signed up. Each one of them is going to have a beer in the pack. We're also going to local chocolate makers for the assorted chocolates that are going in there. And so it's really trying to keep the focus local. That's a big thing that Ryan and I try to do with 90-second beer review. If you look at what we put out there, we do choose some beers from around the country, but the vast majority of what we're choosing is from breweries that are within our state or the neighboring states. We really want to keep things to that local community.
Yeah, I mean, I guess while you're on the cost benefit that Howard mentioned, one of the things also is, I mentioned the beer and yoga and beer and bar. And one of the things with those is that those classes alone would go for $20, $25. And just by getting entry with the $15 admission right off the bat, if that's your thing, you just save $10. So, it's a way of, we're putting a lot of things together in one kind of easy access portal.
So if people want to know about this, do they just go on to 90-second beer review, or how do they get tickets and get access and the whole thing?
Yeah, so you can go to 90secondbeerreview.com. That's 90secondbeerreview.com. There's a Pints of Love section of the website now. It's got your overview. It walks you through the basics of the event. It has a link to the Lemonade social platform. Lemonade social, you can also just go straight there and search for Pints of Love. It's available on the web. They also have an app. And then from there, you can also go into the breweries page. You can look at the 24 breweries that we have involved. When you get onto the platform and you look at the Pints of Love event, you can see a number of the sessions that have already been settled. And frankly, that list is only going to grow. We have a lot of content that has not even made it up on the platform yet, that's still in the planning stages. And we're getting real excited. I mean, again, given the breweries that we have involved, we know the beer is going to be great. And we're just really excited to have a lot of discussions with some of these brewers and help craft beer fans learn more about the industry, what's going on currently. We have some specific topics that we're going to cover in some of these sessions. And then we're also going to just do some sessions, some easy Q&As and things like that, and really help craft beer fans get to know the people behind their favorite beer.
And that's where Matt and I kind of come in on some of this. As far as helping to produce some content, you guys had reached out and said, would you feel comfortable kind of putting together something with some breweries? Matt and I, but I think one of the first things that piqued my interest when looking at the North Carolina and New York connection, both places, as Ryan, as you mentioned, like Long Island is like thriving with craft beer, very similar to North Carolina. It's just pumping out so much great craft beer. It kind of begs the question, like, well, what are the similarities and what are the differences or the challenges that are going to happen between these states? I'm excited to go down deep and talk with some of these these brewers, both here locally and in New York. And for us, if you're a listener of the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast, we're looking for some of the breweries that we have yet to speak with. And so it was great by using some of your connections with some of the established relationships you've built on, that we're going to start talking to a lot of really cool breweries that you've yet to hear on our show, and then connect them with New York breweries that we would probably have never even thought to speak with, and really kind of get a great, refreshing perspective on the beer industry right now. And that's even just kind of like one of the topics we're going to handle over the weekend.
Honestly, you guys were some of the first people we thought about when I was putting this together, and Ryan and I were kind of working on the session list. We love the discussions you guys put together. You have, I think, a really good way of handling these conversations, and I'm really excited to see what comes out of these discussions, because who knows? I mean, I don't know that people have had some of these conversations and really compared what's going on down here versus what's happening up in New York, and there are marked differences. I mean, I think you see it in COVID maybe more than you ever have before, because the distribution networks, the ability for bottle shops to exist is just so much different down here versus in New York. And it really changes the way that people access craft beer and really are able to understand and get experiences with the different breweries in their area.
Yeah, and I think the shipping ability is better out of New York, actually. So I've seen more breweries in New York being able to ship than breweries in North Carolina being able to ship. So, yeah, I think there's a give and take. And, it's interesting maybe to get from the Brewers Guild to get that kind of perspective on what they're working on, what are the directions they're trying to take that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying those words. I really appreciate that. And I don't want to give too much away because I want people to sign up for our sessions on Pints of Love. But yeah, we could talk about anything from the master brewer and how he or she ages their sour beers versus if their wife gives them shit about leaving pee on the toilet seat.
It's quite the range.
Going back to a previous conversation before we got on. Yeah, well, it has to be said. This is what I expect out of at least 50% of the 90-second beer review guys, is that at least one of them built his own bar, has framed jerseys of his favorite baseball and hockey teams, and then also installed a urinal in his man cave. This is all true?
Yeah, so, I think I'd say it's all on how you sell it. So, like what you get with the spin on 90-second beer review on trying to, put a perspective on what you might like that may vary from ours, right? I think I had to spin to my wife why we should have a urinal in our house. And it ironically went better than I expected. So, I would say that drunk men miss toilets. And if you have a sports bar in your basement, there is less cleanup involved if you have a urinal as opposed to a toilet. And that was ironically a selling point, which probably doesn't say a whole lot about me, but I think I'm all for it. So it ended up working out pretty good. And, to go along with an 18-foot bar and, all this,
See,
I have a urinal.
I have a urinal in my man cave. It's just called the sink down in the bathroom.
I mean, clearly you're just not as persuasive as Ryan, and he's putting these skills on display at his day job all the time. So, he's
Yeah, I'm afraid of my wife. There's no way I would ask if I could put a urinal in our house. There's no way.
Right, you'll just pee in the sink.
Just pee in the sink and hide in my shame. That's fine. She doesn't listen.
I feel like that would get me in more trouble.
Okay,
because I feel like she's going to walk in on me one day peeing in the sink, and then I'm going to be like, I don't know how to explain this one.
I just was really different. Yeah, well, I have to test my aim, after being in a urinal so long. Okay, only 90 more seconds of urinal talk. Hey, on a real, something that is much needed, I'd be remiss without saying, is 3 out of the 4 of us on the conversation are apparently huge, dedicated Mets fans, and I know that really has nothing to do with beer, but
But one quarter
What?
of them won the World Series this year.
Okay,
as a
all right.
Los Angeles Dodger fan, just so you know.
And by the way, it is related to beer because with the way that they've played the last couple of years, you have to drink a lot more of it to make it through a season.
To appreciate. Well, and here was my bridge to that is what I'm thinking is Steve Cohen, the new owner of the New York Mets, is very open to new ideas and new things. As a matter of fact, he was at handing out holiday gifts to people driving up bobblehead dolls. Anyway, what I'm thinking is maybe the NCF&B podcast and the 90-second beer review cross over to do a North Carolina raised, New York aged beer sold at Citi Field.
I'm here for it.
What do you think?
And what do they have at Citi Field? That is a great thing about it. We have a brewery built into the field, right? So,
Boom.
although that now just changed over from McKellar to, what is it?
Ebbs Brewing, yep.
Do you know the brewer there? I mean, let's collab.
I do believe that it is weirdly enough, I think it is a Wilpon-owned brewery.
Oh, wow.
So
One thing I would suggest to Mr. Cohn, things that are new and different. How about more runs?
yeah, I'm gonna go with trying to spend like a large market team for the first time ever.
Our listeners love it when we just start talking sports
I'm
in the
sure.
last 10 minutes of our podcast because we're like, all right.
Well, and especially now that you guys have already kind of crushed it on making the wine with that rosé with Botanist and Barrel, I think
You making the wine.
I think beer is just the natural next step, right? You got to work down that path.
We've talked about it. We've talked about it with many people, but I don't think we've we haven't seen it to fruition yet.
Well, you have two guys that actually experimented a bit with home brewing, so I actually have a batch that I'll be bottling up tonight. So hopefully it goes well and I don't kill myself.
What are you making?
We'll
What are
see.
you making? What style?
So it is a no surprise, I guess, a hazy New England style IPA using Mighty Axe hops, actually a Minnesota hop. See how it goes. It's been I guess it's been 4 weeks, so it's ready to bottle
And
up.
see, Ryan had the right idea because he's started brewing once he had a house out in Long Island and had space. My foray into home brewing was done when I was living with a good friend in a 600 square foot apartment in the financial district of Manhattan, and I don't recommend it. It didn't really work out very well. We tried it for about 2 years. We made a few things that were passable, but I quickly decided I was a lot better at drinking beer than making beer, and we kind of moved on from that part of it.
But that begs the question then. So, Ryan, are you going to send Howard your beer for a 90-second review?
Oh.
Ooh. That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, maybe I should.
I think you kind of have to.
So I've had mixed results. I had one that was passable, one that was actually very good, and we'll see what happens with this one. So I only got involved recently, so we'll see how it goes. But so far,
already making excuses.
Well, they say the third time's the charm, and this is your third batch, so
It's great, man.
water.
Well, that's what creation is all about. It's just about experimentation and really messing up. The more you mess up, the more you learn, and then you kind of start figuring out how to do it right.
And that's why I'm so smart. I just mess up constantly.
I buy that. That's my credo, man. Well, I really appreciate you guys giving us some time. One more time. So if we want to get tickets, we want to enjoy 90-second beer reviews, Pints of Love. For one, you have to follow them on Instagram. Really, that's the best way to kind of get interaction with them. So go to @90second beer review.
So that's the first step. Really, just follow us at 90-second beer review on Instagram. There's a link in our bio to our link tree. You can get to our website, 90secondbeerreview.com, which has info on us and on the festival, as well as a link to Lemonade Social, which is the platform that's hosting the event. Tickets are on sale, as are the VIP packs. And from there, I would continue. We're going to continue posting content over the course of the next couple of months, letting people know what they can expect when they get onto the platform, when they get to the event in February. And we're just really excited to have everybody join us and have a really fun weekend, drinking some good beer and talking about beer.
Sounds great, man.
Awesome. Yeah, well, first of all, Howard, when we see you next, and Ryan, at some point, we will send you some Boss Coffee, which is a flash brewed Japanese-style coffee, and it's exclusively on Amazon. So when you go to Amazon, you can get it sent to your house, obviously, and use the NCFB podcast promo code.
And make sure we also get a little proof alcohol ice cream to finish the night. You start your morning with some Boss Coffee, you get all pepped up, and then at the end of the day, when you got to just chill out, we all have our vices of how we calm our nerves, and some of them are eating and some of them are drinking. Guess what? You get them both in the one package. Think differently about dessert. Proof Alcohol Ice Cream has infused beautiful spirituous liquor into creamy ice cream. Beautiful different flavors. You've got pumpkin, you've got peppermint, moonshine, bourbon, caramel, coconut rum. They're fantastic. They are all located at the aforementioned, earlier in the podcast, we mentioned Triangle Wine Company. You can go to trianglewineco.com. You can also find them at Lowe's or Harris Teeter's all over the state of North Carolina and even in its perimeter areas. Just look for them in the beer and wine section, so when you're going to get the beers that the 90-second beer review have asked you to get, you can just look over and see that red branded freezer. It's Proof Alcohol Ice Cream. Reach in there, grab a pint. There's 7% alcohol in every pint. You're going to enjoy it. Go to proofalcoholicecream.com to learn more, or click the links in our show notes.
Set yourself up for a good night.
That's right.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. We're looking forward to the event, and for all of you out there, check out the Pints of Love Festival, and you will drink very merrily.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for listening to the NC F&B podcast. And if you've stuck with us this long, review us on iTunes, and remember, 5 stars are encouraged.